Today's show is brought to you by CBRE. CBRE is the #1 agency lender in the U.S. Their loans offer great features such as non-recourse debt, up to 80% leverage, and interest-only periods, all at the market's most competitive rates. To find out more and get a special deal only available to Old Dog listeners, go to www.cbquote.com/podcast. That's the letter C and the letter B, quote.com/podcast.
This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is a show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, find our podcast, and subscribe. Well, I have been looking forward to this interview for a while here, and I am so stoked about it. This is a show I think you guys are really going to enjoy and get a lot of stuff out of here. If you're a real estate investor, you are a negotiator. Whether you want to be one or not, getting the best property at the best price is fundamental to successful real estate investing. Well, today's guests, Carol, Scott, and Mark Ferguson, are experts in real estate negotiation. And here's just a couple of quick facts, fun facts for you here on our guests. They both are best-selling authors. Combined, they have completed over 1,000 successful real estate deals. They're also buy and hold investors. They've done a ton of flips, hundreds and hundreds of flips. And they're also involved in commercial real estate. Well, together, and with Jay Scott, Carol's husband, they have authored a new book called The Book on Negotiating Real Estate, Expert Strategies for Getting the Best Deals When Buying and Selling Investment Property. Well, let me just tell you a little bit more about their backgrounds. After 20 years in leadership roles in Silicon Valley, Carol Scott left the corporate world in 2008 to start a real estate investing business with her husband, Jay Scott, a frequent Old Dog guest, I might add. Specializing in flipping, buy and hold, and mentoring others, they have completed hundreds of real estate deals all over the country. Carol and Jay branched out into education by authoring several best-selling real estate investing books, including the book we're going to be talking about today on negotiating real estate. She is known as an expert real estate negotiator and attributes much of her success to her negotiation approach, which focuses on listening and problem solving. Carol also co-hosts a new, and I would add an excellent podcast on Bigger Pockets called the Bigger Pockets Business Podcast, a real-world MBA in which she interviews company founders who share their stories, successes, failures, and actionable tips in an inspiring and engaging atmosphere to encourage other investors, both new and seasoned, to grow a business and achieve financial freedom. Mark, who like Jay was a previous Old Dog guest, episode 087, has been a real estate investor and real estate agent since 2002 after graduating from the University of Colorado. Mark has flipped over 175 houses and routinely flips 20 to 30 houses a year. Mark also owns 20 rental properties and a 68,000 square foot strip mall. Mark is the managing broker and owner of Blue Steel Real Estate and is a member of the Forbes Real Estate Council. Mark started Invest for More, a blog, podcast, and YouTube channel in March of 2013 to share his unique real estate property investing techniques. He later expanded Invest for More to talk about his flipping business and real estate agent business. Invest for More has had up to 300,000 views a month and is one of the top real estate blogs. Mark has written 6 books, and a 7th is being released soon, if it's not hasn't already been released. Well, welcome, Mark and Carol, to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to be chatting with you, Bill.
Yep, happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you back, Mark, and it's great to meet you, Carol. I've heard so much from Jay about you, so I finally get to meet the legend behind the name here.
That's way too sweet. I hope I can live up to the expectation.
Well, this is really, I am so stoked about this because this is an area we really haven't talked much about. And the fact that you guys have come up with this book is just brilliant. I think it's such a great idea. But I want to kind of find out sort of the history behind it. How did you happen to decide to do this book, and how did you happen to join partners to do this?
Mark, why don't you take that?
Yeah, no, actually Jay approached me and kind of out of the blue, I'd known Jay for a while, really respected him a tremendous amount because in this real estate business, as you know, there's some really good people and some really not so good people in the space. So Jay was someone I always really respected for his honesty. And he approached me and said, hey, do you want to write a book with me? And I thought, man, there's probably nobody else I'd rather write a book with. So I think he came up with the idea of the book on negotiating, but I don't think either one of us kind of had a solid idea of what to write about. We just knew we wanted to write something together. And he was amazing. I mean, we both have very different styles in how we write. And Jay just took it by the horns and did an amazing job putting this together and had started quite a bit of it. So my props to him, and I try to contribute as much as I could, but it was really a fun process, and he's just amazing seeing how he works and the knowledge he has.
And I want to piggyback on that and say I will speak on Jay's behalf here and right back at you, Mark. He was all excited about writing a book about negotiating because he looked around and just found that was a big piece of literature that was missing in the investing space, right? And everything that he could find out there was really generic, and there weren't a lot of actionable tips, a lot of really good stories, that type of thing. And so he said, I'm reaching out to Mark because I know he's got great stories. I know he has so much solid experience in this, and let's face it, he's just an amazing author and has so many great books. So let's work together and make something awesome for all these investors.
Yeah, originally when we put this together, I had invited Jay as well, and then he couldn't make the scheduling that we had at that time, and he said, Bill, I gotta level with you here. Is when I do my negotiating, Carol does all the negotiating because she is the negotiator for the family, and so he made it real clear that you were the expert on the negotiating side. So he said you got to get Carol, and so Carol, you are here, highly recommended by Jay.
That is hilarious, and the thing that is so funny is I can't argue. He's right. I just love negotiating so much. I just said he's right. And I'll tell you what, when he listens to this, he'll be like, can you write that down? You finally said I'm right. But I just love negotiating so much. I love listening to people. I love solving problems, and I just love creating ways to work it out in the end so that everybody's happy and everybody walks away with a good deal, but especially our side of it where we're super happy in the end.
Oh, that's so neat. Well, you, both of you, Mark and you have a lot in common in terms of the flipping. I mean, you both are like unbelievable flippers, and you've been doing it for a long time. Is that where you really honed your skills in terms of your negotiating? I mean, I don't know if you guys actually do a lot of direct to seller stuff, or do you if you get agents involved? But I would imagine there's just a ton of negotiation that goes on there.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, boy, it all started right when I first started in the industry, because I started as an agent working with my dad, who'd been around for 20 some years before I started. And there's so much negotiation off market and on market. But I learned from the very beginning, kind of dealing with MLS properties, multiple listing properties that are listed by agents. And I worked with banks selling hundreds of properties along the way. And you really learn how the banks negotiate as well from that standpoint. And then we also, do a lot of off-market, direct mailers, drive for dollars, FSBO, for sale by owner negotiating. And it's just learning kind of one step at a time and accumulating this knowledge. And it isn't like one certain thing you learn, but just a whole mass of everything. And seeing all these different perspectives as an agent, as a buyer, as a seller, with flips, with rentals, all of it together kind of gives you an idea of how to work with people. And I'll tell you, I learned so much from this book from Carol, because she has some like secret ninja negotiating tips. But my whole philosophy has always been to try and make it work for everybody, not to beat up the other side. And especially dealing with banks, you learn how you can really piss off a bank very easily, and they'll shut down and not want to work with you, where they'll actually give quite a bit if you kind of do business the right way. And that's where I've tried to base my negotiations from.
Carol, how about you?
Completely agree with everything that Mark said. And I think an important thing to remember too is, just like he mentioned, there are so many different parties that you negotiate with, depending on what the transaction is. You learn along the way that you negotiate a little bit differently with a buyer than you do with the seller, than you do with an agent on the buying side, than you do with a seller on the selling side, and with banks. Everything, there are little nuances for each of those situations that are different. But the interesting thing is there are so many common threads throughout all of them, right? So if you just get down some really basic skills that can be used for all of those different parties, and then custom tailor those skills to whatever kind of negotiation you're doing, then it really helps you seal your deal.
That's the part I think a lot of people aren't aware of. I mean, there really are a lot of different parties involved in the negotiating process. I mean, you like you mentioned, the bankers, you've got the agents, the sellers. I mean, there's all these different levels, and I imagine the negotiation is very different. Let's say with an agent, as it would be for a seller that may not be their regular way of dealing with people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dealing with agents and sellers. And I love your perspective specifically on this too, Mark, because of your, all of your work in that area and with your brokerage and stuff. But I 100% think that working with sellers directly as opposed to agents is completely different, right? Because at the end of the day, that's just more layers in there once there is an agent involved. And in a lot of circumstances, let's be real, right? The seller's agent often has an agenda of their own. So you have to make sure that you're taking that into consideration without letting on that that you're taking that into consideration, right? Whereas when you're dealing directly with the seller, you can really get down into more like nitty-gritty conversations. You can get down to like the raw facts. You can really sit there and listen a lot more intently and gather more facts and information on your own that aren't being clouded once it goes through the hands of the seller's agent, right? So I think that I prefer, what do you prefer, Mark? Do you prefer dealing with the agents, or do you prefer dealing with the sellers? Like, I know I personally love dealing with sellers personally more. What's your preference?
It depends on my mood for that day.
That's so true. That is so true.
It takes so much more work to negotiate directly with sellers.
Yes.
But you can get a better deal, and a lot of times everybody's happier because you can talk to them directly, like you said. It's kind of like two different, like when you're talking to the sellers directly, you're telling them why they don't need to use an agent, why you can kind of help them out, price-wise and cost-wise, working directly with you. Where when you're working with an agent, you're trying to get the agent on your side. They'll convey, your message to the seller in a positive way and not a negative way. Because, if you just send an offer to someone, an agent with no explanation that's $50,000 low, they're automatically going to be mad, negative, and not talk to the seller in a positive way, but negative way. Whereas if you get the agent on your side and kind of explain things, you get them to, portray your viewpoint in a positive way. So MLS is easier because it's all through contracts and there's not as much communication, but you can often get better deals and help the seller out more sometimes by dealing directly with them. So
yes.
It depends on how much I want to talk during that day.
You are so right. And I'm dealing with one right now that it's an off-market property that totally speaks to exactly what you're saying, Mark. So this was from a direct mailer, and we got a great response on it. And it is a seller that's down in a little tiny town of Georgia, in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. And long story short, on the first time I picked up the phone and talked to this woman, not exaggerating, I sat and listened and just asked what else, for not exaggerating, 2 hours and 45 minutes on the first day. Very first day, it was almost a 3-hour conversation. Whereas if it were with an agent, that would have been done in 10 and a half minutes, right? I would have had half a day to do anything else I ever could have possibly wanted. That said, because of putting in that time investment, we were able to build so much rapport, so much trust, so many other positive experiences throughout that interaction that over the course of the next 3 or 4 days, which again, was another hour on the phone on day 2 and another 90 minutes on the phone on day 3. But that said, 6 or 7 hours of my time, we got just an amazingly ridiculous deal on this thing that not in a million years would we have ever been able to get if there were an agent representing that person. So there are definitely trade-offs depending on who you're dealing with. But I think the key takeaway from that is that there is so much importance in being able to build a really good rapport and being able to build that trust with whoever the party is. If it's the seller directly, if it's the seller's agent, if it's the buyer, whomever, it's just really listening, asking about more information, seeing what other nuggets they can give you, and building building that trust so that they feel like you're really on the same side trying to work together so that there's a good outcome at the end.
Right. Now, Mark, do you think there's an advantage to sort of being agent to agent in a negotiation, or do you think it'd be more advantageous as if you were just coming to them as just an investor?
I think there's a huge advantage agent to agent, and I think there's a lot of controversy on this, on which side is better. But first of all, if it's listed on the MLS, I can make a commission as the buyer's agent. So I added that up last year, and I saved over $300,000 either as the buyer's agent or the listing agent, saving half a commission when we sold it as well. Gee. So that out there outweighed any disadvantage to me of being an agent. But there are some cases where maybe not taking the commission would get me the deal, and I've done that before with the big commercial property I bought. We paid, I think, $2.1 million for it. I used a commercial broker to represent me, and I told him he could have both sides of the commission because it's a pocket listing. He only gave it to me first. And so it didn't hurt me there. I just gave up my commission and still got the good deal. So there can be times where you're dealing directly with sellers where being an agent can be a disadvantage. I think that's where most people will say that, because you have to disclose you're an agent. Many times you have to disclose you might be making a profit. You might be buying the house below market value. But the way I do business, I'm very honest with sellers. I tell them what properties are worth. I explain to them why I buy them for much less than what, they could list it on the MLS for. So I have no problem disclosing those things. I have no problem explaining how I do business and make money. So to me, I think it's an advantage there too, because I can say, hey, I'm a licensed agent. You can look me up on the state website. You can see there's no complaints against me. You can see I've been in business for 18 years. I'm not just some guy off the street who's trying to do his first deal on a one-page contract that may or may not be enforceable. So I think it can give me credibility as well.
And as agent to agent, I think you're more along the lines of, hey, we both understand each other's needs and go, we both know where each other are coming from. Let's cut to the chase. Do you save a lot of time in that aspect?
Yes, for sure. And then the other advantage too is because I'm an agent, and I've been in the same area for many years, I've built up reputation of doing what I say I'm going to do. Most of our offers on MLS are no inspection, no appraisal, no loan conditions, closed in 2 or 3 weeks. And I have had 3 agents in the last year bring me deals before they listed them saying, hey, we have a unique situation. There's a tenant in the house, or the seller doesn't want to clean up anything. Do you want to buy this before we list it? Because they don't want it shown. And so I couldn't have done that without being an agent and building up my reputation and being around the business, networking with people. And there's no better deal than an MLS deal brought to you where you still make a commission and nobody else can get to it.
Right.
That is as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm. Well, negotiation and just even the name seems a little bit ominous. And I know that there are those that are just starting out that are a little bit intimidated by that just the process. Oh man, I'm going to have to, I'm going to be careful what I say or how I say it, and it could be confrontational, and you kind of view as one party wins, one loses. Carol, let me direct this to you. Do you approach negotiation in that kind of a manner, or how do you see it where it's not so intimidating?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I really want everyone listening to this to realize it just doesn't have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be intimidating, right? You just have to remember in anything in life, much less negotiation, when you ask somebody anything, what's the very worst thing they can say? Or the very worst thing they can do is say no, right? And if that's the very worst thing that can happen, it's really not that big of a deal, right? So, for example, I'm going to talk about a property we're working on buying right now. It's a property that's in relatively good condition. There were some issues with the HVAC equipment when we went in and did the inspection, and we already had a pretty good, solid contract price on it. But, over the past couple of days, we've realized there are these other issues. And I'm going to be clear. We really, really want this property. There's a lot of potential in it for us. But, all these HVAC issues, it's gonna take a lot to get them fixed, right? So I'm just waiting. I'm waiting to figure out the perfect time to go in and ask. But I have absolutely no qualms whatsoever about going back and saying, realistically, this needs to be replaced, this needs to be replaced, and this needs to be replaced, and you're going to need to take X off of that amount. Now, the interesting thing is I'm obviously not going to use those words, right? So because I don't believe it, of course, that it's a confrontational type of thing. What I'm going to do is make sure this one is represented by an agent, make sure the agent understands, you know what? You've told me already that the sellers of this thing are busting at the seams. You've told me already that the owner the mom is going to have a baby in the next 3 weeks. Let's help her along and figure out how we can meet somewhere in the middle. So ultimately she can sell her house. Ultimately we'll buy this thing. They can move on. We're happy. We can, do what we need to do and make it a positive experience for all sides, right? Now, realistically, there's a very reasonable chance that they could just come back and say, absolutely not. We need this much money out of it. And it is what it is. But that said, what's the very worst thing that's taken away from that? She told me no, right? And that's really okay at the end of the day. We can just make a decision then. Does it make sense to move forward with the property or does it not? But the point of that is you just don't have to look at it as a scary, daunting experience. You just look at what does the other side need to accomplish in the buying or selling of this property? What do you need to accomplish in the buying or selling of that property? So you look at it as a way of solving problems together and just asking questions and figuring out different ways of getting to what both parties need.
Yeah, one thing that you mentioned there that I think is really a key point I know that you make in the book, and that's the importance of sort of gathering information. Can you guys address that in terms of, information is power, they say, right? So what goes into your processes in terms of getting prepared for that negotiation or those discussions?
Do you want to take that, Mark?
Specialty. Yes, that's your specialty.
All right, I'll take it if you make me. That's fine. I'm happy to. At the risk of sounding like a complete and utter, unashamed, unabashed stalker, I just researched the heck out of absolutely every single negotiation situation I'm going into, right? So for example, if I'm going to buy a property, there's so much information that's available online. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything but your time. So to anyone listening out there, just become familiar with how to look up deeds, become familiar with how to look up permits, become familiar with how to look up mortgage information on a property. And additionally, we also, in addition to the property itself, we kind of look at it on several different levels. So we're going to start at a micro level and work out to a macro level, right? So we'll go as far as researching, let's say we're going to use an example of buying a property. If it's off market or it's on market, it doesn't really make a difference, right? Look at it from the micro level of who are these buyers, okay? And it's fascinating to me still how much information people are more than willing to put out all over Insta, all over Facebook, all over Twitter, all over the place for everybody to see. And I can't tell you how many times that we have considered, I'm going to go back to the sell side for a minute. I can't tell you how many times we've been selling a property, for example. We have somebody come in and put an offer, a buyer that might be putting in a low offer, and I'll go ahead and I will research that person. And it is amazing how many times it has popped up right on their Facebook. Oh my gosh, we found the most perfect house. Our furniture is going to fit perfectly. We love the neighborhood. And they're already telling all their friends exactly where they're moving. What does that tell us from the negotiation on this side? Boom, we've got them. This deal is basically already done. We're going back with a full price counteroffer. And we know realistically, they're probably going to move ahead and just go ahead and do it, right? So that's on a micro level. We look at everything we can possibly find out about the buyer. Then we take another step out, going a little bit more macro. And that's where you look at what I talked about a minute ago, looking up the deed, looking up the mortgage information, looking up everything about the house. Then we'll go as far as going out a little bit more and finding out as much information as possible about the neighborhood. So we're known for doing things like, we know, for example, when we're selling a property, that there are a lot of things that go into play when the buyers come into the neighborhood, of course, right? How does the neighborhood feel? What does it look like as just an overall look and feel when you come into the neighborhood? So we'll do things like making sure we'll send someone on our team out on different days of the week, and when the kids are getting off the bus and kids are getting on the bus, to figure out what the makeup of the neighborhood is. Is it calm, or is it kind of loud and rowdy? So, and we put all of those considerations into our negotiation strategies when we go back with offers, right? So like I said, we'll research the buyer, we'll research the buyer or seller, the person, we'll research the piece of property itself, we'll research the neighborhood, and then we take that a step farther and we'll go off into the Department of Planning and Zoning and see what types of things might be coming up in the near future. If there are any highways that are coming in, for example, if there are any new shopping developments that are coming in, if there's any new construction, new developments that are coming in that area, and then we're able to put that together as part of the whole big picture, or part of the whole big package when we're going back into that negotiation. So it's really important to gather information at so many different levels to see what can be beneficial for both parties.
That's great. Great. Well, both of you, before you became master negotiators here, I'm sure you probably learned as you went along, and maybe you can kind of bring out some early mistakes that you made in negotiations, or little case, stories or what have you, where you just afterwards you just go, oh man, I blew it, and just not so much just to zero in on your negatives, but really to help share with our listeners things that they can avoid.
Yeah, I have a few I can start with. And first off, I want to say Carol does way more stuff than I do gathering information.
Obsessed. I'm a little obsessed. It's just not right.
And just to add a few things too from the MLS, when we're like, you can gather a lot of information from a listing comments too. Like if they mention sold as is, needs TLC, any kind of negative information, that's an indication they might take a lower offer. And then really fast price changes too are something we look at as well, where, a house has been on the market 7 days and they lower the price 10%, like they want to sell it fast. So those are a few things. But anyway, back to the mistakes I made. on this big building I bought, where that's actually where my brokerage is right now, inside that building, we got an amazing deal. I mean, just smoking deal, pocket listing. And on the inspection, we did an inspection that showed the roof needed some work. There were some other issues. And my broker, who was representing both sides, suggested we should just push hard to ask for as much stuff as we could, because he thought the seller just wanted to get out of it and sell. And a lot of these things a broker should not be doing, but that's another story. So we asked, I think, for a $150,000 price reduction, and the seller basically said, I'm backing out of the deal, I'll sell it to somebody else. And we, because I had a partner in this deal, freaked out. Like, we did not want to lose this deal. We did everything we could. And in the end, I actually ended up contacting the seller directly, because I wasn't sure if my messages were getting portrayed right, which again is, not the best thing you should do in every situation. But I wanted to let him know, hey, we're not trying to kill this deal. We really want it to work. And we ended up saving the deal, but we basically agreed to no inspection credit at all. We paid whatever the price was. And had we kind of come in at a more reasonable, started with a lower amount, we probably could have gotten some kind of credit, reached some middle ground. But because we were too aggressive and really trying to hammer it home, it just left a bad feeling in the seller, and he felt like he was being taken advantage of. And that's kind of how I've always tried to handle my negotiations, is take the middle ground, kind of be reasonable, and you tend to get more than being, trying to push too hard. And I didn't do it, even though my gut told me I should. Almost lost us a deal. We managed to pull it together. But I've seen that happen before too, especially with banks, where I was listing REO properties, and I had a cash buyer who made an offer on a house. Come inspection time, 57 things were listed on their inspection objection. Like every single thing on the report, like replacing, light switch covers. And as a listing broker, I'm like, the bank is going to reject this. You're going to piss them off. They're going to say no. Like, reduce this. So my advice to you, and you might get some major things done if you ask for a few major things, but doing this is not going to work. Like, no, we're just going to keep it right here. And so they submitted that inspection, and the bank said, nope, rejected, cancel the deal. And so I went back to the buyers and told them that, and they said, okay, we'll still buy it. So they got nothing. But
let's see.
Sometimes if you ask for just, major things, if you're reasonable with what you ask for, it goes a long way versus trying to just get everything and being greedy with what you're looking to buy.
What about you, Carol?
That's really good. I would say a really good example is back in the day, a long time ago when we started this whole business. I still sometimes, it goes back to, like, depending on the day, right? I don't want to give it, this isn't necessarily going to be a specific example. I just want to give like an overall, I can't think the word's approach, an approach tip, if you will. Okay. So this goes back to, we started this business back in 2008, but before that, I did a lot of marketing and PR and that type of stuff, and in big corporations. And just as part of that whole situation, it was very important for me to always be super dynamic, super energetic, super enthusiastic, always just like on top of everything all the time, right? And so the first couple of years when we were doing this business, I took that exact same approach when we were dealing directly with buyers and dealing directly with sellers. And that's, frankly, kind of how I deal. I think how I still most of the time deal with agents as well. So just like, again, just really dynamic, really energetic, really enthusiastic, really on top of it, right? Then all of a sudden, one day, it occurred to me, I was talking to a seller, somebody who I wanted to buy a property from. And I realized it occurred to me, I was doing my normal spiel, telling her everything we were going to do, how our approach worked, everything we were going to do with the property, how much it was worth, and so on and so forth. And she just looked like a deer in the headlights. And you could tell she just mentally kind of shut down. And fortunately, I was good enough at reading her body language that I was able to take a step back, inside my own head and say, wait a minute, I just need to slow this whole thing down. And I immediately just kind of reflected her body language, reflected her tone. And I'm like, let's go sit down and have a cup of coffee. And we're going to work through the numbers and we're just going to take it from the top and kind of do this whole thing over. Right. And I learned in that one interaction by just taking things a little more slowly, how I'm talking right now, or how I was talking when I said it then, right? Just take a deep breath and we're going to get through this process together. And I know this is daunting and I know there are a lot of things to think about, but I'm confident we can come up with a solution together. Taking that approach really just her eyes lit up and she's like, okay, you really are on the same page as me, right? So that happened, a few years into our business. And now when I'm dealing with any type of negotiation, I really take that approach, just a slow down, a not as excited type of attitude about it. And I'll tell you what, it is amazing what a difference it has made in every single negotiation. It makes me wonder how many more successful deals we could have potentially had those first few years before we figured out the importance of that.
That's great. Is there one thing, Mark, that you would say, sort of a single thing that, like Carol was talking about there, that you feel makes you successful in your negotiating?
I think just piggybacking on what she said a little bit is letting the seller talk. I don't want to be real pushy and talk the whole time. I want to ask a few questions, get them talking, and let them kind of guide where the conversation goes. And that, I think, lets them feel more comfortable. And they will tell you so much information if you just build some rapport, learn what they're about, and let them talk. And another thing we always do on first contact is kind of try and figure out how they like to talk, because some people like to call, some people like to email, some people like to text. I've bought a house before all through text messages. And the first time I talked to the guy was at the house, signing the contract. So, so if they like to text, I'll text. If they like to call, I'll call, even though it might not be my favorite thing. And that helps as well, just getting on their same page.
That's great.
And can I add one more thing into exactly what Mark said? I think that's so on the same page with you, Mark. And another tip I like to give in addition to those things, and it really just kind of rounds out the whole conversation, if you will, is we feel that there are two magic words when you're gathering information in any negotiation. It's these two simple words. What else? If you let people tell their story, like Mark said, if you just ask them what their motivating factors are and you let them talk, and when they seem to be done, you just take a second and say, what else? It's amazing. They'll just keep giving and giving and giving. Just remember those two magic words in negotiation. It's called what else, and you'll get more information than you ever dreamed possible.
Oh, that's great. Great information. What would you say? This is kind of along those lines. You made me think of this. That if you were to say that there is like one word, okay, that really every real estate negotiator should know and use, what would that word be?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Well, can I say, Mark, do you have one, or do you want me to take that?
Go ahead. I'm still thinking.
I'm gonna be a little bit counterintuitive to your question, Bill. My one very powerful negotiation tactic that I have is not a word. Did you hear that right there? Did you hear that? No, you didn't, because that was silence, right? So it's not a word. One of the most important tactics in negotiation is just silence. Okay. So not only when you are listening to people to get information from them, when you sit back and listen with a lot of intent, also when you're beyond that part, when you are negotiating something and say an agent on the buying or the selling side comes back with a counteroffer, right? And they'll justify why they come back with that counteroffer. I'll do exactly what I just did. I'll sit there and wait. And eventually they will just start throwing concessions at you because silence is uncomfortable, right? People just frankly don't know what the heck to do with it. They half the time, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. This was just as a straight up sale for a friend. This wasn't even an investment property. This was a retail sale of their house. And this was just a couple of months ago. And the house had been listed, on a Friday or a Saturday, whatever. And it was that typical thing where it was just a hot weekend, hot season to sell. And we had, I don't even remember, 14, 15 showings and had an offer right off the bat. And we listed a little bit higher than we originally intended to, but we're like, let's just see what happens since the market is so hot. Well, the sellers would have been comfortable. I'm just going to use a really round number. So the sellers had already told me they would have been perfectly thrilled to take $625 on the house. Okay. We listed it for $650 again, just to see what the heck would happen. Well, so the buyer's agent brings me an offer the first day for, I think it was $635, if I remember correctly. Okay, $635, which, like I said, that she didn't know this, but the buyers brought me an offer for $635, and like I said, the sellers would have been perfectly happy with $625. That said, it was still $15,000 off of list price. So she sent me this offer for $635, and I just decided I wasn't going to. I just sent offer received. We'll let you know. Thank you. I'll, talk to you after I have a chance to talk to the sellers. I get on the phone with the sellers. I'm like, guys, best news ever. We already have an offer that's over your list price. It's a really clean offer, or not over your list price, over what you want to get out of it. It's already, it's a really clean offer. They can close quickly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They were thrilled. They're like, feel free to just take it as is and whatever you want to do. We trust you. That's fine. Great. So in the meantime, like I said, I had sent this message over to the buyer's agent saying, I'll just get back with you. So I waited about waited till the next afternoon, and I was in the middle of something, and I'm just like, I'll give her a call back when I can. Well, the agent finally calls me. And when she called me, I was like in the restroom or something. So I'm like, I'll call her back in a little bit. And then I got distracted with something else. Then she called me again. Well, with the second time she calls me, and she full on starts apologizing for her offer, right? I was ready to accept this offer, but this agent gets on the phone, and because it had been silent, because the whole interaction had been silent overnight, she started completely panicking. She took that offer from $635 and just said, you know what, we just want to wrap this thing up. We're going to give you full price, and can we just make this happen? So the point of the story is you just sit back and you just don't say anything, and people just start throwing stuff at you. I can't tell you how many times it's happened. People panic for no good reason, but they just don't know what to do with the silence. So they fill it with stuff. It's great.
Oh, that's great. Okay, Mark, you've had time to think.
I did, and I'm going to actually answer the question unlike Carol. So, no.
What she said.
What's a rule follower?
My word is easy, and that just means I'm trying to make it as easy for the seller, the agent, whoever we're negotiating with as possible. A lot of times agents will come back to me and say, that was so easy. There's no inspection. There's nothing to worry about. You closed on, and when you're an agent, you realize how many deals you do are just horrible. There's always something that comes up, an inspection, appraisal. There's always something that is wrong. And when you have a really easy deal like that, it's just such a relief. And so we try to make it as easy for them. If it's a direct seller, leave whatever you want to leave in the house. You don't need to clean anything. We can close in 2 weeks and rent it back to you for a month if you needed to. We try to make it as easy as possible, make their life smooth. And if we can do that, then they're more willing to negotiate on price or terms that help us out.
That's great. That's great.
Mark, you totally win that question. Hands down, you are the winner. You had a word, I didn't even have one. That was awesome.
Well, I had 10 minutes to think about it, though. So I
you can count on me for my stories. You know that.
Well, our audience is primarily, folks 50 years of age and older, although we have a lot of others that listen to the show, but that's our target audience. And these folks are either approaching retirement or they're already in retirement. They're looking at real estate as a means to be able to either supplement their retirement or be a good avenue for them to invest their nest eggs for retirement. Their experience with negotiation may be very limited. They may buy a few properties, but they're not going to be doing anywhere near the volume that you folks are. What advice would you have for a newbie here that's getting into real estate? Just a tidbit that would be helpful for them, as they go in as a new negotiator.
The whole goal of negotiating is to get the best price. So if you're buying, if you're in retirement age or you're looking to retire soon, I think a lot of people just focus on cash flow and say, how much money is this property going to make me? But there's so many advantages to getting a really good deal that will increase your cash flow, increase your equity. If you're using mortgages, the banks will look at you in a better light if you're getting better deals. So focus on the cash flow, but at the same time, try to get the absolute best deal you can, because it makes everything else so much easier.
Great.
That's really, really good, Mark. Really good. And I want to add, in terms, and when we're talking about cash flow, if you're just getting into this, remember there are often ways, especially if you have cash on hand to do a deal with. Remember that often the other party, if you're trying to buy something from them, often that seller will figure out a way to do financing so that you are not outlaying all of your cash at the same time. So going back to what Mark said earlier, in terms of things being easy, often you may have, for example, a person who owns a property who's just tired of being a landlord. They're just, more than anything, they get tired of the headaches of maintenance, and they get tired of just having to screen applicants and the move-in, move-out process and this, that, and the other thing, but they don't necessarily need all that cash up front all at once to sell their property. So they might be willing, for example, to do some owner financing. So just keep those other scenarios in mind when you go to negotiate, that just look to see what other type of options there are that might work for both of you.
That's great. Both of you guys, man, there's some great information here. I wanted to try something. I didn't actually prepare you guys for this, so don't get mad here. But
kind of like the word.
I mean, normally when we have first time guests on, we have this thing we call the wrap it up, where we have a series of quick questions we ask folks. But what I wanted to try here, and it could end up being a train wreck, or it could be great. Okay, but what I wanted to try here was one sentence answers here, little quick actionable tips, okay, on how to be a better negotiator. Like, you might throw out, for example, always wear green. And the other one will say, don't ever say no, or whatever it is. I don't know. But I don't know if this is going to flow or not. But if it takes longer, we can always cut between the answers too, and make it seem like it's going faster.
Okay.
I'll start. Okay.
Ready?
All right. Here, I got to give Mark a couple of minutes just to kind of formulate his response. Okay. And
I'm ready.
You don't have to wait for the other person. You can do two in a row or whatever. Just little tidbits of actionable tips. Hello, old dogs. Before we jump into our wrap it up session, I just want to share a valuable tip for you. You can find the best off-market properties at below market value and within a hot emerging market, and think you've found a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But without good financing, all that great stuff means nothing. However, our new sponsor, CBRE, may be the solution. CBRE has a loan for your next refinance, acquisition, or value-add project. CBRE is the #1 agency lender, and their loans offer great features such as non-recourse debt, which, unlike most banks, means your exposure is limited to the property only and not your personal assets. They also offer you up to 80% leverage in interest-only periods, which can help you maximize your cash flow or pull out more equity. CBRE's loans also offer the market's most competitive rates. In addition to traditional mortgages, their short-term bridge loan platform provides access to competitive financing for your rehab, renovation, and value-add projects that might take a little extra TLC before you get a permanent mortgage. And get this, CBRE is offering Old Dog listeners a $3,500 credit towards closing costs. That's right, $3,500 off your closing costs. Lock in your credit and receive an instant quote by visiting www.cbquote.com/podcasts. That's the letter C and the letter B, cbquote.com/podcast. See what CBRE can do for you and lock in your credit today at www.cbquote.com/podcast. Let's go.
Okay, I'll start with practice negotiating for real estate by practicing negotiating on everything. Anytime you go to the store, ask for a discount, and you just might be surprised. Again, the worst they can do is say no. Mark, you're up.
Do not let the list price dictate what your offer price will be. Use the value of the property and ignore the list price in some cases.
Good.
Ooh, that's good. When you're dealing with the other party, make sure you use their name. Mark and Bill, make sure that you have a really good day because I want to make a really good deal with you. So, but in all reality, just use the other person's name. It lets them know that you're listening and that you care.
That's a good one, too.
When you're talking to directly to sellers, always ask them what their plans are after they sell. If they want to buy something else, if they're renting, if they're moving somewhere. Since we have a brokerage, if they want to buy, we might be able to help them on that aspect as well.
Beautiful. Make your offers really super simple, clean, and easy. So don't put in there a purchase price plus a closing date plus 14 things you want fixed plus you want concessions back in a huge, crazy laundry list. Make it a super simple summary. For an example, I will pay this much money. I'm giving you this much earnest money. I will pay with cash. I will close in 14 days. As is sale, done.
When we're sending offers to agents, we always email the agent first and kind of prep them to say, hey, this might be a low offer. Be prepared for it. Don't fly off the handle as soon as you look at it. And that helps them kind of understand that we might not be making a full price offer.
Wow, this is fun. Okay, I'm going to go with make a concession up front. So what I mean by that is give like a little nugget right from the beginning, and then they're going to feel obligated to give you something back. So even if it's not something that is necessarily super valuable to you, use that as a tool to get something even more valuable back from the other side.
I was going to use that too. Anyway, don't be afraid to tell the sellers that you're making money, that you're making a profit on properties, because that's what you're doing. They're obviously going to assume that. So don't be afraid to tell them, hey, we might flip it and make money, and explain them how many costs there are and why your offer is where it is.
Excellent. Talk to the neighbors in any neighborhood in which you are doing a deal. You'll get information about the property. You'll get information about the neighborhood. And even more of a bonus, they will likely end up finding you other properties. It happens all the time.
Great stuff.
When we're working on a property, we'll put a sign up in our yard for kind of pre-sales. We'll list it on Facebook. So as far as negotiating, sometimes we can have buyers ready to purchase the house before it's even listed, which can actually shorten the negotiation process and make it quicker to sell.
Awesome. If you do have cash on hand, but you are still going to end up getting financing for the property, preferably, write up in your offer that it will be a financed deal, but it is not contingent on that financing, and give them a proof of funds in cash. They will feel like it is a cash deal and they're more likely to accept.
Wow, this is good stuff, you guys. Man, that was fun.
It was
No,
fun.
really, this is good. I mean, I'm like blown away. I learned so much just talking to you guys. I wish I could go another hour, but I'm sure you guys are thinking, no, I don't want to go another hour.
Oh, you know me. I could talk for like 5 more hours. But seriously, enough, Carol. Just stop.
I know. It's like with my wife, it's the same thing. You know, I can answer something in about 2 or 3 words, you know, and she's got like 50 paragraphs, you know.
That's right.
But it is, you know, it's always more effective than my 3 words. That's the problem. Well, you guys, this has been really, really wonderful. It just good stuff. Got a great book. We're going to have a link to it on the website so that folks can, just go ahead and pick up a copy of it. I also wanted people to get some information on how they can reach you or find out more about you both. You both have like these awesome, businesses going and a lot of educational materials and all kinds of stuff. Maybe we'll start ladies first. Carol, how can people reach you and find out more about what you guys are doing?
The most awesome thing to do right now would be to subscribe to the Bigger Pockets Business Podcast. Just go onto your podcast app, do a search for Bigger Pockets Business. You'll see a picture there with Jay and me, and hit the subscribe button and listen. We have new episodes out every Tuesday. You will love it.
That's great. Again, I have listened. It is a great show, and they're actually really funny.
Thank you. We have so much fun.
No, it's like a comedy team. It's great. I love it.
Thanks.
How about you, Mark?
Invest for More, which is invest, the number 4 spelled out, FOURMORE.com is my blog. Mark at investformore.com is my email if people want to get in touch, and posting at least one new article a week. And then my YouTube channel, the Invest for More YouTube channel, we're up to 45,000 subscribers, and we're showing videos of every house that we buy, before and after, advice videos, all kinds of great stuff there. And then, of course, we have Facebook, Instagram, where we're posting a couple times a day, too. So just trying to post as much stuff of what we're actually doing in the business to show people what goes on, the good and the bad.
Awesome.
I love it. Well, gosh, guys, this has been awesome. I don't know if there's anything I missed. Anything you guys want to add at all, or before we?
No, one last thing is you can also find out more about Jay and me on 123flip.com, and there's also links to all of our books there. But just thank you so much for this conversation, Bill and Mark. It's been super duper fun.
Oh, it's been a blast. It's been a blast. But Mark, you're a veteran. You know how we usually close the show here. Not usually, but always close the show is our guests get to give us their best old hound dog howl to close us out. So we've got 2 howls here. So this is going to be a real treat for our audience. Mark, you did have a really good howl when you were on. So Carol, you're going to have to really just kind of have to stand out. Okay. So
wow.
I'm going to count to 3, and then you guys can close us out with your best old hound dog howl. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
I don't even know what that was.
I have no idea what just happened, but it was scary and it was cool at the same time. So you guys, we have loved having you on. Thank you so much. I mean, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. This has been awesome. Have so much fun, Bill. Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Thanks, Bill and Carol. It was great. I loved being on the show.
Well, you
so
bet.
much fun. Thank you.
You bet. And I just, want to say all those that also listen, thank you for listening. The show is going to have some great information. So check out the show notes, and there'll be some links in there and all kinds of great information for you. So that is it for today. We just thank you all for listening. Cash flow is king, and real estate investing the means. Thanks for listening, and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.